I appreciate this opportunity just to tell you this little story. And it's a story that started really over 70 years ago. And like every story, it probably needs a title. And since it's my story, I can make the title I want. And my title is, Lassie Finally Loves Me. All right? Well, where the story began was in Perry, Iowa. And I was about 5 years old. Must have been this summer. I was still 4 years old. And my father's really upset. All right? It's the first time I can ever remember him being upset. And he was calling me a procrastinator. Now, my dad followed my grandfather's into the mines when he was 8. And he was a factory worker, essentially. And that's the biggest word I ever heard him say for the rest of his life, all right? I've always known what that word meant. He must have, at the time, been very explicit to point out what it was. And I seem to have carried most of my life this reality that I really didn't like myself very much. That isn't really true. I mean, I think better way to put it is always disappointed. I never was quite living up to my own expectations. I would never get things done that I started to and so forth. So it all kind of fit together. And over the years, it had a lot to do with self-respect, self-esteem, and probably self-love and a whole bunch of those, psychological terms or feelings or whatsoever. But it was troubling all my life. And when I was finally started to realize, how trapped I was, I wake up every morning and like everybody else, I just turn into me, all right? And oftentimes I wanted to go there, but I keep ending up here. That particular reality that passed through my life was like a great secret. It was like my little quest. Generally, when you finally figure out that you're trapped, it leads to suicide, truly. But mine kind of took a different bent to it. It more like this quest to find a way out of being me. The thing that happened. Let me go back a little bit. I was born into a life of privilege. I got to go to really good schools. I grew up in a family that really cared for me. All right. I can only remember one time where my father spanked me, and it was back in when I was very, very young. I got to go to good schools. My IQ is they told me it was above normal. I mean, really, in a time when America's rising and kind of the world was our oyster. But yet, I kept tracking on this. I'm not saying I didn't do important things. I'm not saying that I didn't do really good things. But it wasn't the thing I wanted. Really, all of this started to change with an accident, really. Earlier this year, I was over to seeing my doctor over by the library, and as I was coming out, I saw the car of a friend of mine, and I hadn't seen him for about a year. I knew he was having some troubles, so I went into the library and started looking around for him, and I found him, and we went over and we sat at one of the little kiosks there for a little bit, and I asked him what he'd been doing, and he said, about a year ago he had kind of a nervous breakdown, which I'd already figured out. and that he was feeling better and he was back to working part-time and so forth. And then he asked me what I was doing. So I laid out some, one of my things that I was in, kind of grandiose sort of thing. And he listens for a while. And yeah. He said, is that going to be another thing you do not finish? Whoa. The oxygen came out of the room, all right? It was not because of what he said. It was because another friend a week before had told me the same thing. When you can get around somebody telling you something, you go, oh, I know this guy, he's nuts. No, we left that territory. And so I said my little, see you laters, and I went out to my car and sat down and tried to digest this. I mean, this is, for me, it was more than monumental. It really shook me up. And as I sat out there was this war going on in the front seat of my car between terror and relief. It wasn't my secret. Everybody knew it, all right? And so as I sat there, the part of me that said relief won, all right? So in life, we have accidents, good and bad. Well, I was about to have a good accident. I was, later on in the week, I was looking through some books on habits and habit formations, because that's part of the business I do. And I run onto a piece of information that just jumped off the page and changed everything. It was like the missing piece that I'd been looking for all this time. And it was so simple, it was elegant, and it made everything make sense. I don't know if any of you have ever had that opportunity in your life, but if you get one, they are really precious, all right? Well, listen, to this party of finding out how the thing works, I mean, I wasn't a green beanie. Things that I knew for sure is that I don't have one brain, I have three. And at the bottom one is like an alligator. It's called the limbic area, and it sits right at the top of the brain stem, all right? And it's only interested in three things: food, sex, and survival. That's it. That's all it does. And sitting on top of that sits my limbic brain, where all my habits, training, all of that stuff live in that particular area. And on top of that sits my cortex sits on the top, the new part, of the kind of the human part, and it's the observer. If I just stop for a moment and there's no talking in this room and you look around, that's you. That's consciousness. That's the observer. And its job is to observe what's going on in and out of my life. That's its big job. There's only one problem with these three things. They don't run at the same speed. Down on the bottom, the alligator, and also the lassie, the next part up, which in the book they referred to as the lassie brain, all right? They run at breakneck speed. I mean, it is wicked fast. Let's say it runs at 100,000 miles an hour. And the one on top, sitting on the top, my human brain, 100 miles an hour. Slow, slow, slow. So I've never been able to get around in front. The bus has always left the station before I show up, in other words. So it's almost, if not impossible, to get beyond my genetic training and my human training. We know that my brain is very plastic, and I get enough around me, and you will change my brain. It's very plastic. And it'll change the structure and what I do and what I think. But from the inside out, I've got this little problem. I'm always behind the curve. so I can never get around in front of it and get in the driver's seat. But what the little piece of information that I was given that meant so much, he called it the Lassie brain. And everything made sense. Is how do you train Lassie? All right? Basic behavioral stuff. If Lassie's going this way, the wrong way, you ignore it. And if Lassie's going this way, the right way, you give Lassie a treat. I mean, they got fish to talk. Not really, but I mean, at least, you know, get to graduate school, all right? So what the thought that went through my head is, why don't I start treating my brain just like Lassie? If I do the wrong thing, ignore it. And if I do the right thing, give it a treat. So what I come up with is a test. I'm going to be my own lab rat. So I say, okay, how are we going to see if this works? So I said, all right. First I have to do is pick out something I want, which is probably the most difficult thing to do. But I picked out something low level. I've got a chin-up bar that goes into my office. And I decided at one time I was going to do a couple of pull-ups every time I went through that thing and come out. Pretty simple, right? Didn't do it. I mean, a matter of fact, it disappeared. I didn't even see it. So I said, okay, 5 in, 5 out. And then I put a little bowl of M&Ms on the inside of the door. So the first time I go in there and I do it, I give myself an M&M. Whoa. Within a week, I'm in there doing pull-ups like crazy, all right? Every time as a matter of fact, as I went down the road, I upped it to 10 and threw in push-ups beside. Oh, this is crazy, all right? And now I'm looking forward to going through my door. Never done that before. So then I said, okay, let's go to the next level. So I said, okay, your diet. So I laid out the most perfect diet that I could find, which is the most difficult things for human beings probably to do because it's one of the big 3. Food, sex, survival. So I did that, and the first time I started eating the right thing, I'd give myself an M&M. Okay? Now I should have gotten stock in the Mars company before I started on this thing, but within a short period of time, I'm eating things and doing things that I'd never done before. It was like child's play. It was none of this sitting around. I didn't have to go to a lot of meetings and sit around and wait for you to change my brain. For the first time, I could mess around with the structure of my own brain, my own habits, and say, and that was liberating. I have never experienced as many successes since that time in my life. And number 2, what I think of myself has dramatically changed. Whether you call it self-respect, self-esteem, or self-love. They like arrived. They weren't even asked to do that. The only thing that I have found, I mean, it works every time, all the time, as far as I'm concerned, in my experience, all right? And it's so simple and easy to do. It's child's play, really. You don't have to sit down, does it work? No, get yourself some M&Ms and try it. I mean, in a week's time, you'll know, all right? And the only thing it cost you was 35 cents for the M&Ms, all right? Now, the only thing I found out that makes it go faster and make it go better is exactly what I'm doing here today, is teaching you how to do it. And hopefully, when you leave our little meeting today, you'll go out and get a box of M&Ms. Thanks.